Our agency received a call on July 18th, 2024 at about 10:52 in the evening, and it was a male reporting that a female had been found hanging at the residence.
The caller was David Norman. His son, 40-year-old Jerod Norman, lived with 30-year-old Mariah King, the female, found hanging at the residence. Mariah, one of 7 children, beloved by her family.
She was bubbly, she was loud, she was boisterous, she was the light of the party. She was part of the glue that held our family together.
She was a little mama.
Very much.
Mariah and Jerod shared this house in Sweet Home, Oregon, land of rivers, lakes, and the majestic Cascade Mountains. When authorities showed up soon after the 911 call, all hands were on deck.
Once officers arrived on scene, medics from Sweet Home Fire also arrived at the same time and started interventions on Mariah, CPR, breathing intubation, etc.
They tried everything, but it was no use. Mariah was gone.
The medical examiner arrived shortly after that, and while they were examining the scene with the patrol officers, they started to feel like this wasn't really what it was initially reported to be, which was a suicide.
Mariah and Jerod met in the summer of 2021 and fell hard for each other. They had 3 kids between them from previous relationships. Mariah lived for her children, an 8-year-old daughter and 5-year-old son.
Happy birthday to you. She was a beautiful mom. You could see it, you could feel it, it was palpable. It was an amazing experience to watch her become a mom.
But Mariah's relationship with Jerod was not nearly as tender. Her family says it was turbulent almost from the start.
There would be periods of time where Jerod and Mariah would get along, maybe like a few days, and he would go back to ignoring her, silent treatment, saying nasty, malignant, hurtful things to her.
When he would get upset, he would literally tell her he was going to go to a bar and hook up with another woman, then proceed to get in the shower and then leave. She would call me hysterical, and I would get there, she'd be on the floor, just a complete mess.
After one blowout about a year into their relationship, Mariah moved back in with her mother. She stayed for 5 months.
I found out during this time that Mariah had been aware that he was using methamphetamines and had promised her that he was going to quit, but had failed to do so. And she was just really getting tired of it. And she was trying to get his attention, talking about self-harm. And he told her, well, you know where the gun is. And he proceeded to tell her how to aim the gun so that she didn't just blow her pretty little face off.
Still, Mariah got sucked back in. She would stay with Jerod for another 1.5 years. During that time, police conducted multiple welfare checks on the couple. Detective Sean Potter brought us to their residence.
Usually it was more just checking on her because of maybe a disturbance that she had had with Jerod, or sometimes people were concerned for her mental health, if she had maybe been drinking or something like that, and just wanting her checked on. And all of those checks had turned out fine.
In the days leading up to her death, Mariah's family says things were anything but fine. She confided in her sister she'd had a terrible fight with Jerod.
Mariah told me that he had picked her up in the mattress and shaken her, yelling and swearing at her, saying, "Get out of my effing house, you." And her kids were asleep in the next room over. I said, "You know what, Mom is right. You need to leave." I was pleading with her, come on, take some accountability. And she hung up on me. And it was the last time I heard her voice.
Until a month later, and that awful day. Kim's mental health was suffering from all the drama, and she was not speaking to her daughter. But that night, Mariah asked to see her.
I got dressed and I drove to Sweet Home. And I went and I saw my daughter. She ran up to me. She hugged me. It appeared that she was intoxicated, but I immediately noticed some marks on her neck. She looked down, her voice got real flat, and she told me, "Oh, that. I tried to stop myself from breathing." And I knew she was lying to me.
After Kim said goodbye, she called the Sweet Home police to request another welfare check. They showed up at the house at 9:20 p.m. Mariah said she was fine and sent them away. Kim never heard back from the police that night. But at 11:36 p.m., she did hear from her daughter, Michaela.
She was hysterical. She was crying. She was vomiting. And she was telling me that Jerod had just called her and told her that Mariah was dead and that she had killed herself.
I was told by Jerod that she hung herself in the shed. He said that he cut her down and started CPR, and that he called for his dad, David, to bring his phone and call 911.
I immediately didn't believe it. I immediately knew there was no possible way.
She's alive at 9:20 p.m. when the police do a welfare check on her. And then an hour and a half later, she's dead. What happened in that hour and a half?
Mariah had sent me a text message on the 16th. It said, "Hey, Mick, what does your week look like next week?" And I texted her back. I said, "Hey, I was out of cell service. What do you mean? What's up?" And she never got back to me. She never opened it.
Was Mariah orchestrating a sleeping with the enemy type escape? Did she snap and decide the only way out was suicide? Or did someone kill her and stage it all? For law enforcement, something didn't pass the smell test.
On scene, it pivoted from suicide to homicide, probably around the time that they started noticing the ligature marks and things that just didn't really make a lot of sense. And that was when the autopsy was requested.
In the wake of Mariah King's death, her sister Michaela says Mariah's boyfriend Jerod Norman wouldn't leave her alone. And he seemed focused on one thing.
He was texting me weird things and harassing me. He would ask me questions like, "Hey, have you gotten the autopsy report yet? Did they find anything on the autopsy?"
What could it have been about the autopsy that Jerod Norman was so concerned with? The answer stunned everyone.
The autopsy was done the very next morning, and a foreign object was located that was of great concern to investigators inside of Mariah's body.
A foreign object inside Mariah's body? True Crime News pressed for answers to no avail.
I cannot go into any specifics as to what the foreign object is. That's a key piece of evidence in this case. However, it was determined without a doubt that it's not something that Mariah could have done to herself.
So that's the great mystery, is what is this foreign object? Nobody knows, the media doesn't know, and it's left to a lot of wild imaginations.
When Jerod Norman finally sat down for a police interview a month after Mariah's death, Detective Sean Potter kept it cool and casual.
I didn't ask him any particular questions, just more of an introduction of myself. Kind of just kept the interview more of a, "Hey, how you doing?" Not to give him any sort of a concern.
Once the forensic testing was done and the investigation complete, the detective says Norman was suddenly hard to pin down. But he knew Norman had a court date coming up on an unrelated case, so he waited. Finally, 6 months after Mariah's death, it was go time.
January 13th, I located Jerod at the Lane County Courthouse. He had been avoiding me for about a month before that. I had tried to set up an interview with him before, and he stopped returning my calls. When I finally told him that he was under arrest, he asked me if I was serious. The answer was yes, I was serious.
3 days after being taken into custody, Jerod Norman was indicted for murder in the second degree and abuse of a corpse in the first degree. He's now being held at the Lane County Jail until his next hearing. It's been an emotional roller coaster for Mariah's family.
A lot of feelings just got ripped back open, but I was happy something was being done about it.
She didn't deserve this. She didn't have a single enemy in the world.
She was sweet.
A few days after the incident, Mariah's family held a public vigil to remember the loving mother of two. Thinking of her grandchildren breaks Kim Lapham's heart.
She won't be there for her daughter's prom. She won't be there for their graduations. She won't be there for their weddings. She won't be a grandmother.